Welcome to Lesson 2 for making the jeweled velvet clovers. We'll start with picot beading the petal edges. From your kit, you'll need the size 11 and size 15 seed beads, beading thread, a size 10 milliners or bead embroidery needle that is threaded and knotted at one end, one of your stuffed clover petals to start, one of the cardboard petal pattern pieces, and a straight pin. Stitch into the petal from the top side, then to the tip. At the tip, take several whip stitches in place to secure the thread. Now match up the cardboard pattern to the stuffed petal and place a pin where the straight edge ends. From the tip, stitch to the pin along the seam line. Take several whip stitches in place to secure the thread. Once secure, trim away the waist knot and lose the little thread end. Slip one size 11, one size 15, and one size 11 seed bead onto needle. Stitch back into seam line at a distance that is equal in width to the size 11 seed bead from the starting point, working from petal front to back. Pull the thread taut, then turn the petal over and stitch back up through the last seed bead, again pulling the thread taut. Turn the petal over again. Now slip one size 15 and one size 11 seed bead onto the needle. Stitch into the seam line at a distance that is equal to 1/2 the width of the size 11 seed bead. Tighten thread, turn petal over, and stitch back up through the last seed bead. Repeat the process of slipping one size 15 and one size 11 seed bead onto the needle, stitching into the seam line, turning the petal over and stitching back up through the last seed bead until the petal edge is completely beaded, ending where the straight edge begins again. Bead the other two petals in the same way. Hand sew two petals together along the straight edges using doubled matching thread conditioned with a knot at the end. This is a stab stitch kind of process. Work slowly and carefully, making certain each stitch is very secure. Continue sewing all three petals together in this manner. You will need one pipe cleaner and a ruler to make the stem. Bend the pipe cleaner at the 2-inch mark for the first bend, then at the 1.5-inch mark, and again at the 1-inch mark for the next bends. These measurements are for a smaller stem. Trim excess using a wire cutter. Squish the pipe cleaner, then secure thread at bended end and wrap the length of the pipe cleaner with the thread to make a cohesive shape. The stem has a wider end and a pointed end. Cover the wider end with a small piece of the 1/2-inch wide bias fabric strip using tacky glue. Now wrap and glue the rest of the stem with the 1/2-inch wide bias fabric strip to cover the stem completely in a florist tape style. This is a base coat or a liner for the stem. For extra body, lightly spray starch the 13mm and the 7mm stem wrap ribbons. Now wrap and lightly glue the 13mm ribbon over the bias covering in the florist tape style. Using the 7mm ribbon, wrap and glue diagonally, florist tape style, beginning at the narrow end, wrapping to the wide end, then back again to the narrow end. Hand sew the top of the stem to the clover center using stab stitches. Stitch multiple times back and forth until the stem feels secure in place. Bring the thread to the underside and tie off. Using the set-aside piece of lace, sew a gathering stitch beginning at the scalloped edge. Use doubled thread, conditioned but not knotted. At the scalloped edge, take 3 whip stitches in place. Sew down the short end, then across the straight edge, and back up the opposite short end. Pull the gathering thread so lace gathers as tightly as possible. Overlap the short ends in order to form a circular ruff and sew the overlapping ends together, cinching the lace tighter in the process. Take the piece of nonwoven interfacing and sew ruff centered onto it. Adjust the ruff gathers, then secure ruff to interfacing at the center gathers. Keep shaping the ruff and adjusting the gathers while stitching ruff to interfacing. Thread 2mm silk ribbon on chenille needle and lock on. Tie a soft knot at the other end. Fill ruff center with loop ribbon stitches. Here's how. Bring ribbon to surface, scooch ribbon to form a little loop. Pierce ribbon at loop base, pull ribbon through, leaving 2 little loops on the surface. Use the still attached thread to flatten some of the loops with a size 15 seed bead. If necessary, take a few more anchoring stitches at the ruff overlap. Carefully trim away the excess interfacing from the back side. The ruff can now be either hand sewn or glued to the clover center. The back side is cleaned up with a covered button, and for an ornament we'll make a little loop. Tape one end of the 18-inch length of cotton floss to work surface. From opposite end, twist the floss a lot until it starts to kink up on itself. Fold the twisted floss in half, matching up the ends. Floss will coil up on itself, forming a cording. Remove the tape in order to tie ends together in a tight knot. Fold the cording in half, forming a looped end. Tie another knot 1 inch from the looped end. Pull the knot very tight. Trim away the excess floss 1/2 inch past the knot. Glue the loop to the center back of the clover. Cover any spare button with a small circle of velvet, yo-yo style. A small bit of batting slipped into the yo-yo makes for a nice touch. Glue the covered button to the center back. In the next lesson, you'll learn how to make the clover flower and a beaded dome.